Hey folks, welcome to Moonshift Audio. For this week's video, I teamed up with the excellent Dan Messersmith. If you haven't seen his channel, I definitely recommend checking it out. He's got some great content for music producers and songwriters up there. We set each other a challenge of making a track using only a small pack of presets. Dan put together a pack just for this project, and I sent him a selection of 12 of the patches from my free Retro Serum presets pack, which you can download from the link below. I really enjoyed this project, and although it was a challenge to make a track using such a small selection of sounds, I've often found that limitations like this can actually be quite inspirational. We agreed not to spend too long on our tracks, and mine came together in about 3 hours. In a total departure from my usual style, I ended up making a sort of UK Grime kind of beat. I've never worked in this style before, but I was actually pretty happy with how it came out.
Smoke up, that's in the blem. Free up the guys and dip out the ends. Jump in the ride and burn out the rims. Don't stop, don't catch the boy that I'm in. Now he's on the block, could he up for events? Skin kept close, could you putting on them with the tints on 10? Batch in the back that's on tap, all ready to go and jump in. Being like them, never keep it real in the ends. Never leave crib or the ends.
I jumped on a call with Dan and we took a look at how the production came together. Alright, so here we are in Cubase and welcome to Dan. How you doing, Dan?
How's it going, Jack? I'm so happy to be able to come on here and talk about some presets and this awesome production that we both did for each other here.
Yeah, man, it was such a great project. I really enjoyed it. It was a good challenge.
Exactly. Yeah, I love being kind of put into a box, so to speak. It really makes you work outside of your own boundaries and outside of your own norms or whatever. And I think that really fuels my creativity.
Yeah, I totally agree. Also, I found that getting a small selection of just, I think it was like 12 sounds that we sent each other. But
yeah,
for me, in a weird way, it felt quite freeing because I didn't have any kind of restrictions about what I was trying to do. It was really nice to really feel free to just kind of go with what I felt in the moment, and I just listened to the sounds and I was like, oh yeah, I got this idea, I'm going to run with that.
Yeah, and it gives you, like, instead of working the other way around where it's like, okay, let me keep searching through all the different folders that I have for the right sound. It's like, no, just you have this sound, so make the right song. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And, you know, like you say, I made this kind of UK grime style thing, and I've never made a track in that style before in my life. I think I just heard one of your presets. It was the brass one. And I was like, wow, that just like reminds me so much of mid-noughties UK grime. I was like, right, okay, yeah.
Yeah, which, that's surprising to me that you say you never even tried that style, because it sounded like you've done, 100 of these before when I heard this back. So I'm really excited to dive into it a little bit and see how you flip these presets to make them fit into this track.
Is there anything in particular that jumped out at you when you first heard the track?
I just want to kind of understand a little bit about how you manipulated these things. I know when I made these presets, like I did add in some of those like macros and stuff like that. So I wanted to see what kind of modulation and stuff you did. And then just ultimately, I felt like the track really popped. You really nailed like making these synth sounds sound very transient and punchy. And I'm interested to see how you made that sound when mixed with the drums, any side chaining or anything going on. So yeah, that's kind of the stuff I'm looking into here.
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, I've got to say, you made it pretty easy for me, man. Like, the macros were really helpful, and the sounds were complementary. You know, you didn't just give me loads of, like, mid-range sounds that I was going to have to, like, work really hard to fit around each other. It worked pretty well. So I guess I'll just go from the start. We can take a listen. So I think I started off with... We've got this kind of Jaws-esque on the brass, and... This is your brass patch. I don't think I changed it very much. And actually, I've got no processing on it at all. There's like, if I pull up the channel for this, nothing whatsoever.
Yeah, there's a little bit of ambience like built into the patch. I don't know if there's like a small reverb on it or something, but there's something going on there. It's in a space.
Yeah, and that's all I needed there. So literally that one is pretty straight. And then when it came to the verse, I used the macro there, but I'll just show you. I layered it up with your organ patch, which just gave it a little bit of extra kind of presence, like high-end sizzle.
Yeah, a little bit of bite in the mid-range.
Yeah, exactly. And then I layered this up with your kind of comb filtered, I guess it's like a kind of lead, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm using your macro there, just sliding in. You can see that coming down here, just to kind of open it up as we get into the verse itself. And then I've just used some modulation there to kind of just switch it up a bit, add a little bit of interest.
Okay, so those are just the two macros that you're changing there? I see.
Exactly. Yeah. And I did do a little bit of processing on this. I just rolled off the lows and put a scoop in the mid.
Oh, okay,
because
because it
this
really
is
does
where I've got the
sparkle
sub.
in the sides. You know, it's very stereo sounding.
It's funny, in prep for this call, because I made this in like 3 hours. We kind of set ourselves a time limit, huh? And when I came back after a couple of weeks to kind of prep for this call with you, I went through the mix and I was like, wow, I did like nothing. I hardly did anything in the mix. But I did some mid-side work in Pro Q3. So yeah, scooping out the mids, which helps to make space for the vocal and the kick drum and the main bass.
Exactly.
And
okay.
I think in some other parts I might have like boosted the sides. But
Which
that's
is-
literally it. There's no processing at all other than just this little EQ scoop.
Which I think that's like a good thing to think about when it comes to using these kinds of sounds, is that it's this is very different to say a pop song, or I don't know, any other type of like instrumentation you're doing where you're writing these parts to fit together like melodically, harmonically, all that kind of stuff. Here we're just trying to get them to fit together in the sound design way. You know what I mean? So like this sound itself doesn't have much melodic feeling or fundamental, whatever. It's all about the texture, and it's really just like sound effects we're kind of playing with here almost, you know?
And that's quite unlike what I normally do in my productions. I'm normally quite heavily into melody and chords and all of that. So it's been great to play around with something, again, that just kind of pushes you into a different box. And you're right, because, you know, the only real note, apart from the womp, womp, womp on the brass there, is the sub bass. I was really happy that you provided me one patch that was quite kind of clean and had a good solid foundation, because when I heard that comb lead, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that's great, but I want some real weight under that.
Exactly, because if it's all texture, you know, then it gets mushy, you know what I mean? You need some of that like fundamental like foundation to the track as well.
100%. So that's where I brought in this sub bass, and it's just playing an F every bar. But it just sits under the comb lead there really nicely. I used a stereo plugin just to make that mono. I pulled all the side information out because obviously you want your sub to be really, really mono. Compressed it a bit. Nothing particularly fancy, just wanted to kind of, you can see it's just taming in the transient a little bit. Yeah. So I added in some of the kind of like upper harmonics and scooped out some of the mud there. And that's really just so that anyone listening on smaller speakers is gonna feel that.
Yeah, and
or
you're
at
also
least
carving a
have
hole
the
for
suggestion
the
of it.
vocals to fit in too.
Yeah. So this kind of like 500 hertz, you got a kind of bit of the meat of the vocals there. And then I just like put some drive in with a fab filter Saturn just to kind of, again, just to make it a bit more audible. You know, this kind of music really has to work well on phones and small speakers. But you still want to know that the bass is there, even if you're not getting those low notes, you know?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like we listen to so many tracks just like on a TikTok, Instagram video, whatever. That's where we're here, like getting introduced to a lot of songs or whatever. I recently listened to, there's a new song, if you've listened to Fred Again, and they worked with this group Over Mono. They did a track with this rapper Lil Yachty, and this is like a track that they built like for the club, for like a massive system with like this like earth shaking bass on it. And the guy who featured on the song had never heard the song on a big system until it actually came out. So for the music video that they did, they just took him into a club and just played the song for him, and it just shook the space, and he never heard it like that. He'd only heard it on a phone, you know what I mean? So
it's funny, I'm literally working on a video right now on how to make a track like that track.
Oh yeah.
Like I'm working on the track. I didn't know that story though. That's amazing.
That's incredible. Well, I'd love to hear that track as well.
Yeah, I'll play you some in a bit. Yeah. So going back to this one, again, it's pretty basic. I think one of the things I really liked was getting that brass sound again. And I'm just going to mute the vocals and we'll just have a quick listen to the way that I used automation. You can just see I'm just sweeping it down every couple of bars. But it just becomes a bit more present.
Nice.
And it kind of gives that offbeat just a little bit of a swing.
Yeah.
No inserts at all, no EQ, no compression, nothing.
It's super
There
snappy.
is that little bit of reverb in the patch. And we're kind of getting there. The only other element really is the strings. I used your macro. You got this really nice wash, which is affecting the effects mix on this. And I started off with it on absolutely full blast. So it just washes out those strings really. I was just like, that's the perfect intro. Just handed to me on a plate. So thanks for that. And then I sort of transitioned out to a much more dry sound. So, should have a look at the drums quickly. Again, I've never really programmed a beat like this, but I just got on Splice and searched for grime packs, and they're all from the same pack. I wasn't spending too long kind of thinking about this. I just grabbed a load of kicks. Some snares and rims. And these are all just hats. I'll just quickly pull up the pattern. And here we go. So you've got the hats
and
here.
The hi-hats, yeah.
Yeah, we can hear that on its own. Just those ghost notes are almost kind of inaudible, but they do give you a little bit of feeling, just a little bit of like, it's almost like there's a kind of nervous energy to those hats that I quite like. Offsets the real boom kind of like power of the low end.
Yeah, they feel sneaky or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But just a little bit of that like variation in the velocity makes it feel so alive. Same thing like you were doing with slight changes of the macro on this, like the sound design of the synths and stuff like that. It makes them feel a lot more alive and dynamic as opposed to just like, oh, we're playing it from a rompler, like do. You know what I mean?
Especially on a very sparse arrangement, there's room to hear quite subtle changes. Like the change on that offbeat womp. It's not massively obvious. You know, in a busy mix, that would just be lost. But in a sparse mix like this, you really feel it.
You hear the difference, though, from like, you know, the start of the bar to the end of the bar. It's just a little bit of something, you know?
Yeah. I ended up using a couple of the other hats, and then I just chose one of the kicks.
Okay.
And a low snare and a high snare. So the kick, this kind of music has a really, similarly actually to the overmono style kicks, like they're really crushed. They're really distorted. So I've got going quite hard into a decapitator. So I'll just like bypass all of these effects and we can take a listen to the kick as it came. So it's pretty meaty, but I just wanted to actually rough it up a lot, you know? So really adding some kind of knock with the decap there.
Yeah, it makes that, I feel like that little bit of saturation, it makes it sustain a bit more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it brings out the tail for sure. So after that, not much EQ, just a little bit of boost in the fundamental. And then I'm going into a clipper. Love this clipper. And you can see, quite aggressive, yeah.
But that makes, like, the second you turn that on, I heard the difference there. You know what I mean? Like the transient and then the sustain of it feels like it's brought a lot closer together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would almost never treat a drum like this. So it's really fun just being like, yeah, I'm going to clip the, like, how many
clip
dBs
the
is that?
daylights out of it.
Yeah. But it just sounds right, you know? It's like, that is the sound that I wanted.
It doesn't feel
and
wrong
it just
in
does
the mix,
it.
yeah.
We can have a quick look at the snares.
Could I hear the pairing between the low and the high snare just for a second? I just want to hear those.
Sure.
Because those are quite different, yet they work. They come together nicely.
So that's your low. And here's the high. And now here's both.
Yeah, those two things, it really rounds out the sound, you know, for that backbeat.
Yeah.
I like the combination of
the two.
the
The top one's almost like a kind of trap snare, you know?
Yeah.
Which are very thin because trap's got so much enormous low end going on. But again, in this kind of track, there's room for a bit of low snare, but also it demands it, you know? If we play the track without that low snare, and now I'll bring it in.
Yeah, the snap is there without it, but that like lower end like thump, that body of that backbeat isn't there.
Exactly. And I think it really cries out for that, you know? In such a thin arrangement, you got to give the weight where you feel the gaps.
Exactly, yeah.
So we're kind of at the stage where I brought in the vocal that I found on Splice. This is probably the single element where I did the most work in terms of processing. I'm just going to give you like a full before and after. So this is before.
Burn out the rims, don't stop, don't catch the boy that I'm in. Smoke up, that's
It's
in the
quite well recorded.
Then dip out the ends.
Let me just turn off the reverb as well.
Don't stop, don't catch the boy that I'm in. Smoke up, that's in the blem.
And here's after my chain.
Jump in the ride and burn out the rims, don't stop, don't catch the boy that I'm in. Smoke up, that's in the blem.
So it's a bit brighter.
Jump in the ride and burn out the rims, don't stop, don't catch the boy that I'm in.
Without.
Smoke up, that's in the blem. Free up the guys, then
Just a little bit tighter.
Jump in the ride and burn out the rims, don't stop, don't.
So if we have a quick look at what's going on here, I dropped the gain a bit just with a gain plugin so that it would come into my plugin chain at a sort of more appropriate volume. Rolled off the lows, which is always a nice thing to do before you start getting into compressor. You can do a lot with a compressor on this kind of vocal. So I'm using this Blackface 1176, which I really like. You can see here,
Don't catch the boy that I'm in. Smoke up, that's in the blem.
I'm trying to just catch
Jump in the ride and burn out the rims,
the
don't
peaks.
Stop, don't catch the boy that I'm in.
So I've got
that's in the blem.
fastest attack, slowest release.
Jump in the ride and burn out the rims, don't stop, don't catch the boy that I'm in.
Yeah, so you can see I'm not doing loads.
Yeah.
This is something that arguably you could do with clip gain if you wanted to. And if I was doing a bit more of a serious production, I probably would do that. I probably would still use a fast and a slow compressor. But I did this whole thing in 3 hours, you know, so I was throwing this together pretty quick. So that was just to kind of catch the peaks, like the highest peaks, and going into another compressor afterwards. And this is Arvox. The thing that I like about it is that it doesn't just compress. I don't know what's under the hood, but to me, it always adds a really nice bit of body. If we listen to this, it probably is going to be a bit of gain added here.
Blem, free up the guys, then dip out the ends.
I'll bring it in now.
Burn out the rims, don't stop, don't catch the boy that I'm in. Now he's on the block with the up for revenge. Skin kept close, cause you plotting on them with the tints on 10. Batch in the back that's on tap, all ready to go and jump in. Smoke up, that's in the blem. Free up the guys,
I'll turn it off.
The ends. Jump in the ride, then burn out the rims, don't stop, don't catch the boy that I'm in. Now he's on the block with the up for revenge. Skin kept close.
Can you hear the low mids?
Yeah, I could just barely hear how the low mids feel a lot more consistent. You know what I mean? Is that the feeling that you get?
It definitely EQs, I think. You know, there's a few compressors that EQ. Like, for example, Silverface LA2A adds some really nice, like, high-end excitement, and it brightens things up. This seems to add a little bit of body to a vocal in a way that I really like.
I'd like to learn more about that plugin and see how it's doing some of that stuff, you know?
Yeah, I'd like to do a little bit of reading about that as well. You know, like if you use a digital compressor, like just like a stock compressor from Cubase or Ableton, you might find that if anything, you lose a bit of the low end energy when you compress.
Okay.
So there's something a little bit unusual going on with Arvox, but I love it. We'll go on from there. I've got an EQ, a Pultec, and you can see I'm putting like 1.5 dBs in at 100 Hertz, and also attenuating there as well. Do you know the Pultec trick? It's a fun one. Yeah,
how I understand it is that the way that you put down the cut and the way that you do the boost creates a nice little like certain rotation on the EQ curve and creates like a little bit of a sharper bump.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the cut, the attenuator is a narrower Q than the boost, because the boost is pretty wide. It's almost like adding a low shelf and a high shelf. But you just cut the area where the boost is just so you don't end up with a big muddy, boxy or a harshness in the high end. It just adds a little bit of a smile curve, you know? Is
this a trick that you use often to help add a little brightness to some vocals?
If it needs it, yeah, for sure. To be honest, this chain is a little bit different. You know, I tend to use a lot of the same plugins when I'm working on a pop vocal.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I know where I'm going with that, but it was fun with this because I started to go down that road and load in the same plugins. And then I was like, hang on, this isn't a pop track. So I kind of reined it back in, and that's why I'm using different compressors. I think normally I might have ended up using the Marg EQ on a pop vocal. Here, the Pultec just felt more appropriate.
Does it feel very transparent to you? Or do you feel like it adds a little bit of coloration to it?
there's definitely some saturation that you get from there.
Do you feel like it's kind of adds a nice presence, but it kind of rounds it out as well? That's just like a question I have, because I see that Pultec EQ used a lot, especially on vocals and like bass and stuff like that, but I haven't played around with it too much, aside from using it in a studio here and there in the past.
It's very subtle, I'd say, the saturation. Like, you can hear it if you really listen, and it's definitely desirable. Goes a long way on a vocal, and it's a cumulative thing. You know, I'm getting some saturation from that compressor there. I'm getting a bit of saturation out of the Pultec, and that all helps just to kind of give it a little bit more presence in the mix. I will often put a Pultec on the master. If I'm doing a mix and, you know, I do the basic levels, and then it sounds like maybe I'm going to be adding a bit of top to almost everything, or I want to, like, the overall tone of the mix is a bit dull or a bit thin, I'll drop a Pultec on the master straight away before I start mixing and put a little bit of a high end and or low end boost in. And you get a little bit of saturation, which just helps gel the mix together. But you also can kind of dial in that broad stroke tonal change without having to put an EQ on every channel in the mix and do a similar thing. Of course, you're going to go back and do some more like involved EQ on the individual elements, but it's just a way of saving yourself some work and saving doing quite so much processing on individual parts. So that's the way that I would often use the Pultec.
I guess that's why they call it the program equalizer, right? You're using it on the entire thing.
Yeah, right. Not much more on this. I've got a really, really minimal EQ here. Again, just kind of doing almost a little bit more of what the Pultec was doing. Coming back from there, we got the fresh air, 5% on each. And to me, that's enough. Like, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with this plugin.
Oh, yeah?
Especially when it came out and it was free and everyone just kind of jumped on it and got really, really into it. But man, like, I got sent quite a few mixes where the vocal in particular was just destroyed with this thing.
Yeah, I've been on the wrong side of hearing this plugin for sure.
So here's what I would like to use it for.
Free up the guys, then dip out the ends. Free up the guys, then dip out the ends. Free up the guys, then
very subtle.
Free up the guys, then dip out the ends. Free up the guys, then dip out the ends. Free up the guys, then dip out the ends. Jump in the ride, then burn out the rims. Don't free up the guys, then dip out the ends. Jump in the ride, then burn out the rims. Don't free up the guys, then dip out the ends. Jump in the ride, then burn out the rims.
Just a little bit more sizzle. You know, I used to get vocals that sound like this.
Jump in the ride, then burn out the rims. Don't free up the guys, then dip out the ends.
And it's really hard to get rid of that.
Don't free up the guys, then dip out the ends.
Yeah, I'm hearing that sizzle, but I feel like I'm definitely hearing a bit of that like high mid presence boost as well. So you know, somebody I was talking with somebody one time and they were like, this no way this plugin just EQs. Like, I'd like to know like what kind of saturation or something is going on in the background to add some of that high end, you know?
I'm almost the opposite. I'm kind of like, I wonder, is there EQ in there as well, or if it's just an exciter?
I gotcha. Okay.
But yeah, I've also heard people dropping this on their 2-bus and cranking it right up because it just makes the whole mix sizzle. And it's like, oh man, no,
killing your ears.
That gets pretty painful. Yeah, for sure. So that's my vocal chain. The only thing that I haven't looked at with you is the reverb. And this is Lexicon 480L. It's got some really nice ambiences in there. And for something like a rap vocal,
jump in the ride, then burn out the rims. Don't free up the guys, then dip out the ends.
It's not like a ballad vocal where you want some huge hall or a plate coming off the end of all the phrases. Yeah, exactly. In the context of the mix, you probably won't even hear the reverb that much.
Smoke up, that's in the blem. Free up the guys, then dip out the ends. Jump in the ride, then burn out the rims. Don't stop, don't catch the boy that I'm in. Smoke up, that's in the blem. Free up the guys, then dip out the ends. Jump in the ride, then burn out the rims. Don't stop, don't catch the boy that I'm in. Smoke up, that's in the blem. Free up the guys, then dip out the ends. Jump in the ride, then burn out the rims. Don't stop, don't.
I hear the difference though. I hear that it just sustains a little bit longer, and I think that's a way that's really powerful to use a reverb, is not like an exaggerated effect, but to help glue the vocals with the rest of the mix by kind of putting them in a space, so to speak.
The way I like to think about this kind of reverb is the sort of thing where if you just listen to the track, you're not going to be like, oh yeah, that's a wet vocal. But if you take it away, you're missing something. You do hear it go.
Especially when all of these other instruments, even some of these low mid instruments, these bass instruments, they have a reverb on them. You know, they're not fully dry. So I feel like it's fitting to have that on the vocal as well.
Yeah. And it can actually add almost a bit of power to the vocal. You know, like giving it a bit more body. You know, the reverb kind of blends into the vocal and just helps it sound just a little bit bigger. So that's my vocals, pretty much. And that's basically all the elements of this track. I had a lot of fun with it. But again, like, I was surprised coming back and looking at the mix how little I did to actually mix those elements. Obviously, a lot of work to get the vocal sounding right. And everything else, you know, apart from a little bit on the bass, it's mostly just levels and a tiny bit of EQ. And I think this is a good example of how an arrangement is important.
Exactly.
You know, like, I reckon you could almost turn off all of the processing on every channel and just do levels, and it would sound passable for sure.
Yeah, it's such a good conversation, like surrounding when you choose the right sounds that have the right context, that are already, you know, kind of built for a type of song that you want to create. It makes it that much easier.
Yeah, the number one thing that'll get you a good mix is a good arrangement. Like when I get sent a track to mix and you've got a lead vocal, then you've got 3 backing vocals, then you've got a guitar, then you've got keys, and then you've got synths and pads, and they're all occupying that same mid-range. I'm just like, right, well, I've got my work cut out here.
Exactly.
Whereas, you know, when you get an arrangement where you've got the lead vocal and, you know, a couple of parts that fit around that, and then the vocal drops out, and then you get the guitar comes in, and you get these synths, and it's just like... Yeah, and things make space for each other, and I'm going to be able to deliver a better mix because of that, you know?
Yeah, I used to... I've really tried to work to the opposite side of this these days, but if you look into some older projects of mine, I would stack synth sounds and then organic sounds together, trying to call it like a textured sound that I'm creating, but what I'm really doing is just kind of often creating mud. You know what I mean? There's like, how many of those sounds that I'm stacking together are actually essential and are crucial to playing the role that they're supposed to play in the energy of the song? You know what I mean? Probably only 1, maybe 2 of those layers. So that's a balance. It's like, do you want to stack all these sounds and then try to take the rest of the time like trying to fix them and carve holes for each other, or just start off and feel more confident about the sounds that you are choosing? Because I feel like the decisions I would do to stack all these sounds together, I would do that because I was actually not confident in any one of those sounds. So I felt like if I stacked 10 of them together, then it would be okay. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I've been guilty of the same thing. When I was first producing, my productions just never had the weight and the fullness that I wanted, and I realized it's because I wasn't doing any layering. You know, I was just putting one sound in, and then, all right, that's my mid-range, and then one sound in, that's my bass. And then I learned about layering, and I just went way too far the other way, and I was just like throwing so much at it. And, you know, I feel like if I'd sent some of those tracks to a mixer, the first thing I would have done is mute half of them. You know, just like, right, we don't need that, we don't need that, we don't need that. And it would have come back sounding better.
Exactly. Great. Anything else you want to talk about? Breaking down this awesome hard-hitting track that's not even in your style?
Well, I feel like I might want to do some more in this style. I'd be interested to send this to, you know, because I listen to a bit of grime every now and then, and sometimes when I'm out, a DJ will play some grime and I love it, but I'm not like an expert. So I would be interested to hear, you know, if anyone's watching this and you are someone who listens to a lot of grime, what do you think? Is this way off? Does this have the right sound? I didn't have any reference tracks when I made this, so it's a gamble, but yeah, I loved it.
Fantastic.
And thank you for the presets. They were inspirational, man. And they made it easy. You know, like I say, they all fit it together really well. Very little mixing work. And, you know, a lot of that was the sounds.
Good to hear them.
I'm really happy, mate. So I'll look forward to seeing what you did with mine.
Fantastic.
Okay, so that was my track. If you want to download the presets that Dan sent me, there's a link to those on the video we made where we take a look into the track that he made with the presets that I sent him. Dan put together something really special, so I definitely recommend checking out that video as well as his other content. That's it for this week. I'm going to end the video by playing out the track I made from start to finish. Till next time.
Free up the guys and dip out the ends. Jump in the ride and burn out the rims. Don't stop, don't catch the boy that I'm in. Now he's on the block, could he up for events? Skin kept close, could he plotting on them with the tints on 10. Back in the back, that's on tap, all ready to go and jump in. Being like them, never keep it real in the ends. Never leave crib or the ends. Me and that kid, we don't even need to pretend. Me and them boys, we ain't friends. Summer 20, galley on me. Mad shots, parties all week. Sweet one pushing on me. Slave to the scene. How did it get so peak? They ain't down. They just think they are. Another little wannabe gangster trying to play hard. Do it like that. Pitched up on my own. Right side, it came back. This lifestyle had me wrong. Woke up and then I kicked up. I turned ghost on them, I'm gone. Kicks on and I'm gone. Head missed and I dipped and shit. Clocked that, it got long. Flashback, thought you got mad, then he then cracked that. In and out of Dolo when the new mads. To the boys were on him and he crashed that. Till they came back, man, I don't act like. Head soft, yeah, all of that one pack. I could be anywhere, feeling alright. Turn the game on the head, it's all mad at. I'm like, they ain't down, they just think they are. Another little wannabe gangster trying to play hard. Do it like that.